Apple TV Plus's Severance is officially back, and given the information we learned in episode 1, the behind-the-scenes after-credits video, and all the other promotional material that's been released thus far, we can begin putting the pieces together about what we might come to expect in upcoming episodes. Though not entirely confirmed, it's reasonable to assume, based on the promotional images and narrative structure set up in episode 1, that episode 2 will focus on the lives of the Outies. Episode 1 focused solely and entirely on the lives of the Innies, without so much as a glimpse of the outside world. So, it stands to reason that episode 2 might follow a similar pattern, only this time with the Outies. There's a lot that they've still yet to catch the audience up on, so it's likely that they'll follow the aftermath of the so-called Macrodat uprising and fill in the blanks of what occurred prior to the events of episode 1. It's clear we'll be picking up right where we left off as far as the Outies coming back into consciousness. The behind the episode features a small clip of what looks like Outie Mark coming to. You can see Rickon and his friend Patton turning toward Mark here. In the Season 2 trailer, we see footage of Mark holding the image of his and Gemma's wedding, and his sister saying,
"Your Innie said she's alive."
Given they're both in the same location, situation, and outfits as the Season 1 cliffhanger, this is likely the immediate aftermath of him yelling, "She's alive!" Both the behind the episode and various trailers feature footage of Helena in the same outfit she wore at the gala, walking through the Lumen building into a conference room. She's escorted by a new character for Season 2, who appears a few more times, which we'll get to. She's meeting up with Miss Cobell, likely to discuss how to proceed in light of what has just happened. This conversation has been teased before, as Cobell in the trailer says,
"You fear me."
And Helena responds,
"We fear no one."
Most likely this is Cobell expressing resentment at being fired at the end of Season 1, and Helena, ever the leader, responding to her complaint. In an interview with Patricia Arquette, the Today Show released a brief clip of this conversation.
"I welcome your contrition."
I'm so glad.
There's much damage to control. I recommend we start by scouring the feed, and I need to interview Dylan G. to see how he gained access to
We
that.
have something else in mind.
Cobell's firing is complicated by the fact that she did technically come and save the day at the end of Season 1, so I imagine Lumen will be trying to deal with this diplomatically, as we see in the clip. Regardless, Helena seemingly ends this conversation by saying,
We have something else in mind.
This could potentially be further proof of a popular theory, which is that it was in fact Helena and not Heli R who we saw on the severed floor in episode 1. Obviously Lumen, or Helena, have some sort of plan of attack as a result of this uprising that has already been thought of at this point. Also in the trailer we see what is presumably Helena's hand hitting play on security footage of Mark and Heli's kiss. She seemingly smirks in reaction to this footage. Now these could easily be spliced together from two totally separate, unrelated scenes. It doesn't seem like she has access to technology that could actually play this footage in front of Harmony in that boardroom, but she does obviously have access to this footage, and that could be what she's referring to. Perhaps part of the plan they have in place has to do with exploiting or manipulating the connection between Heli and Mark as a way of infiltrating the severed floor and spying on them. In another promotional clip, we very briefly see Helena recording a message similar to the one we saw in episode 1 of Season 1, where she's explaining what happened after the outburst of her Innie.
This evening, I said some deeply regrettable things. I'm committed to this company with every part of me. I'm also human, just like my Innie, and just like you.
This will likely be a form of damage control to reassure investors and partners of the company that Severance is not a negative, though it's unclear what narrative exactly she'll be spinning. As for the aftermath of Irving's outings, we see various footage of him in what seems to be the same outfit he wore when he went to find Bert, again examining his own paintings, perhaps reflecting on what they might mean. This promotional image of Irving is confirmed to be episode 2, so the footage we see of him approaching or exiting the phone booth are more than likely in that episode as well, which also supports the idea that we'll see more of the Outies in episode 2. Yet again, we have evidence to support this, as this promotional still includes Helena in what seems to be the Lumen building. This could potentially match up with this small piece of footage, as the hair and the silhouette seem similar. It's likely we'll also see this clip from the trailer.
I know you're still weighing whether to return to Lumen. But the Mark I've come to know is happy.
As it'll catch the audience up on what has happened in the time between the revelation and Mark's return to work in episode 1. In the trailer, we see the shot of the exterior of Mark's house, and outside is what looks to be a motorcycle, which can also be seen in other parts of the trailer. This likely belongs to Milchick, as his outfit could match the person we see riding the motorcycle, and it isn't something that's normally parked outside Mark's house. These shots could potentially be Milchick riding to Mark's house to convince him to return to work. Another promotional still for episode 2 includes Devin at a diner, which matches up to this footage from the trailer.
This is obscene.
I just want to be sure.
Despite what he was told his Innie said, Mark seems to be resistant to the idea that Gemma might still be alive, which seems to be what they're discussing here. This also could be part of the reason why he took so much time and convincing to return. In this clip, we see the main four returning to the elevator, seemingly making their way up after their first day back at work, as all of their outfits match what they wore in episode 1. So, I'm assuming we'll return to this day and see the same events in episode 1 from the Outies perspective. In the trailer, we see a confrontation between Mark and Miss Cobell, and I think this might be following his first day back at work, as, if you lighten the footage, the tie seems to be the same. It looks like he's returning home, getting back from work late, and he's wearing professional attire, which he likely wouldn't be doing were he still on a hiatus from work. Miss Cobell seems to have a suitcase in hand, so it's possible that she's trying to escape or abscond somewhere. But she's also dropped the pretense of Mrs. Selvig and refers to Mark directly as herself.
Hello, Mark.
Thanks to a clip Ben Stiller released, we can see that this confrontation ends with Miss Cobell speeding off after being confronted by Mark about Gemma. Throughout the trailers, we hear audio of her saying,
Mark, there'll be no honeymoon ending for you.
And
She's still alive.
it's possible that these pieces of dialogue could be from this scene, as Mark is questioning her directly about Gemma.
Do you know something about Gemma?
This promotional still for episode 3 includes the missing poster for Miss Casey, which can be seen at various points throughout various trailers. There's footage of what seems to be Irv's hand handing this over to someone, and then subsequently them making copies of it. They're probably trying to locate Miss Casey at this point, so they're going around handing these out and spreading the word. Irving was most likely the person who drew this, as we've seen his artistic ability before. There's a similar drawing both of what he painted in the Outie world and Bert in a flipbook, which could potentially be the very same book in his hand in this picture. Another promotional image for episode 3 sees Mark and Helly in the hallway, and their outfits are important to cross-reference to other footage. It's relatively easy to pair this footage together since they have the same outfit on in all of these shots. From this footage, it seems that perhaps Mark and Helly are going around searching for other departments, potentially to spread the word about Miss Casey. This is also the same episode where Gwendolyn Christie's character is introduced, and given her scuffled appearance and the bell she's been seen ringing, it's possible that she's in charge of wrangling the goats that we were introduced to in season 1. They seemingly come upon Gwendolyn Christie's character, and in a social media clip she says,
You're here to kill me.
No.
It's interesting to note that she has a different colored badge, which I think could very well correspond with her department. The references to color throughout season 1 and in episode 1 of season 2 seem to indicate that apartments might be color coordinated, and there's a lot of evidence of this that we see in episode 1 of season 2. Namely, the introduction of purple as a color entirely. If I'm not mistaken, I don't really remember any mention of the color purple in season 1, nor do I remember any imagery that included the color purple in Lumen's building. However, in episode 1 of season 2, all of a sudden, there's all this purple. We see Mark running past a room that's entirely purple carpets. The new workers have a debate over the shade of purple in their old office. The break room consists of entirely purple chairs. There's a purple balloon in one of the corners, which goes along with the other cornerstone colors of Lumen, generally speaking, populated throughout the room with other balloons. So there very well could be something intentional about the departments and the divisions of Lumen based on the colors. In the trailer, we also see a brief clip of what looks like Mark rallying the troops,
If we let this happen to Miss Casey, who's gonna step up when it happens to us?
discussing their need to locate Miss Casey, and there's greenery behind him. And while I originally thought this might be outdoors, it makes more sense, since it's Innie Mark, that it's actually him recruiting people in this department for help. The greenery could easily match the same ones that we see in these clips, and also, when he's pleading for help, you can see the silhouette of a pointy shoulder pad, which seems to correspond with that of Gwendolyn Christie's character. So, again, in search of other departments to spread the word, it seems like their mission was accomplished as they discovered an entirely new department with entirely new employees and were able to spread the message about Miss Casey. This still of Miss Cobell in a parking lot is also credited to episode 3, but the context is pretty vague. This footage isn't confirmed to be episode 3, but it's possible that all of this footage of Dylan G wandering the halls and ultimately coming across what seems to be the quote-unquote visitation center referenced in episode 1 occurs in and around this time. His outfit is consistent among the footage, the same coloring of the shirt and the same pattern of the tie. It also could potentially match this still from episode 3, but it's a little difficult to tell as it's not head-on. In these shots, we see a bunch of screens with a picture of Dylan and who we can safely assume is his wife, Gretchen, played by the incredible Merritt Weaver, by the way. Milchick said,
If you take the name of the room at face value, I'd say yes.
So it would make sense if this so-called visitation center was some perversion of the truth where the Innies are allowed a glimpse at their lives and families without having any real access or connection to them. Regardless, Innie Dillon would probably still be grateful for this, which might be why he says,
Badass.
Speaking of this clip, it's placed with another clip that is likely unrelated. Regardless, this new character is one we see a few times. First in the scene with Helena and Miss Cobell, and in 2 separate scenes where he's speaking to someone, and there's audio of his voice saying,
Your work is important. Your work will be remembered as one of the greatest moments of this planet.
He's likely someone involved with the company, as we see him escorting Helena, talking to what looks to be Milchick, and always discussing the history and context of the company. Episode 4 includes what appears to be the first outing for the Innies, as we see in this still and various corresponding footage from trailers. We do see Milchick say, which is ominous. In the episode 1 claymation sequence, they mention new perks, one of which is a quote-unquote hall pass. In the animation, the pass has wings, and once Helly grabs it, she and Irv are transported, seemingly flying off. So I wouldn't be surprised if this hall pass is a new perk instated to allow the Innies to go outside on a field trip of sorts. Perhaps in order to make them feel more like human beings, or equally to suffer on the outside world. Currently, there are no promotional images available past episode 4, and the order of events for the rest of the season is less clear, so I won't be discussing them strictly sequentially. One of the recurring things we see in promotion is clips of both Gemma and Mark in what seems to be the outside world prior to her death. Mark reckoning with the possibility that Gemma might be alive in some fashion would prompt more exploration of and thought about their past, so this makes sense. Plus, that's still a big mystery, and there are a lot of questions that need to be answered as far as that storyline goes. We also see multiple eerie clips of Irving seemingly hallucinating in the office, similarly to the images his mind would conjure when he was falling asleep in season 1. The scenery is much darker and more sinister this time around, very Stranger Things upside down-esque, but in it we see a version of the office, his desk, and even a somewhat menacing Bert. Whether this is side effects of possible reintegration or a breakdown Irv is having induced by his fatigue and heartbreak is unknown, but he certainly begins to struggle with reality, it seems. There's also a melon carved in the shape of Irving's face, which could potentially be a party thrown in celebration of his retirement, which would check out if he were struggling with hallucinations of some sort. We see clips of Helly being forced underwater, which is likely related to the claymation sequence which showed quote-unquote pineapple bobbing as a new incentive for Lumen. In the claymation, their hands are tied behind their backs as they dunk and bob underwater. It's possible this is simply a new form of punishment or torture we might see in the future. There's also a clip where Cobell says,
Was a pineapple involved?
Seemingly referencing this, so somehow, some way, this is something she knew might happen, which shows insider knowledge of this practice. In the trailer, there's a very brief shot of Dillon sitting across from someone who appears almost identical to him while doors move consistently in the background. It wouldn't surprise me if this is somehow what was being referenced as the mirror room in the claymation video. It's sure to be more sinister than harmless wacky fun, and it's easy to imagine all the ways that a mirror room might turn horrific very quickly. In the trailer, they placed this clip of Helly saying,
What the hell?
right next to the reintroduction of the other characters, but as we saw in episode 1, she was wearing an entirely different outfit, so this wasn't her return with her coworkers. Whether this is Helly or Helena is difficult to tell, but the shaky camera stands out to me as it's very rare to have this camera technique or style employed on the show. Most of the show's cinematography is intentionally smooth and stable. In a social media advertisement, this was placed next to this clip of Miss Huang, which has a similar camera movement, so I wouldn't be surprised if these clips are related somehow. If it really is Helena infiltrating the severed floor, I could see this being her actual first day where she's introduced to Miss Huang for the first time and perhaps learns the ropes about what's going on down there to avoid detection when she returns alongside colleagues. These clips of Mark are interesting as he covers himself with a blanket to look directly into what is labeled a UV filter, which has the words "Who is alive?" This might be Mark's attempt to get a message to his Innie by imprinting the image on his eyelids so when he closes his eyes, his Innie might be able to see the message and be reminded to investigate. Obviously, this is probably in reference to finding out whether or not Gemma is alive. There are multiple surrealist clips of Mark and Miss Casey, and it's difficult to tell whether these are dreams, hallucinations, an artistic interpretation of his confusion, or even possibly disorientation caused by reintegration. We see the return of Natalie, giving Milchick a taste of the cold indifference from the board, which so frustrated Cobell in Season 1, a rite of passage for this position, I'm sure.
The board has concluded the call.
We see a clip of Mark crying and saying,
I want to see my wife.
at nighttime, maybe to Cobell, and this might also be the place where she says,
She's still alive.
I could see a world where there's an alliance between Outie Mark and Cobell to get back at Lumen. There's a very brief shot of Rickon looking up from what seems to be a typewriter with either fear, reverence, or both in his eyes, and this might correlate to the newspaper we saw in episode 1. Perhaps Lumen, through threat or flattery, recruited Rickon and convinced him to write a new book that surrounds the philosophy of Kier. We see clips of Mark running in a parking lot, presumably Lumen's, looking backward and likely trying to escape or evade something or someone. There are a few very quick shots of Dr. Ragabi, who we met in Season 1 and was responsible for reintegrating Petey. Her return almost certainly indicates more exploration of the process of reintegration at the very least, though based upon other promotional material, it seems very possible that Mark pursues reintegration at some point. There are multiple shots which are reminiscent of the experience Petey had with reintegration as far as Mark goes, flashing back and forth, being disoriented in time, one space or person entering another seamlessly. Dr. Ragabi turns a dial and looks over at what looks to be Mark's head facing downward, perhaps during the process of reintegration. We see a very quick shot of her shining a light, and then a shot of Mark having a light being shined at him. Any footage we see of Mark in casual attire could be at any point during the season, though it seems indicative of a resistance to Lumen of some kind, whether that be in the interim when he was deciding whether or not to return, or in the process of him pursuing reintegration. We see him exiting what looks to be a Chinese restaurant, and in the back it looks like Helena can be seen, so they might have met up for some reason. Perhaps she was trying to convince him to return to Lumen in the first place. There are a few shots of Cobell driving around somewhat aimlessly, though she does appear upset. These could slot really anywhere in the season and refer to a large number of situations, so it's pretty vague. There's a shot of Mark approaching the hallway, which seems to be the hallway that Miss Casey entered, but he's in his casual clothes, so this yet again could be another indication of reintegration of some kind. There's a very quick shot of Helly laying beneath someone, kissing them, and it's not out of the realm of possibility that this is either a partner Helena has on the outside or Mark. One of the things that was referenced in the newspaper now available to Lumen employees was sexual liberation. So I wouldn't be surprised if they created an allotted room or time for Innies to engage in romantic or sexual interactions with each other, either to improve and enhance their lives as Innies on the surface, or to make their lives that much more miserable. Incredibly, there actually is more to talk about, believe it or not, but for today, I'll leave it there as my general observations of some of the things that we learned from episode 1 of season 2 of Severance, and how they relate to the upcoming episodes and the promotional material we have received thus far. Let me know your thoughts below, any theories, predictions, anything that you noticed that I didn't, anything you agree, disagree on, and I will see you for another video soon.